Hello and welcome to part 2b, which is still scenario 1, and hopefully I have got everything set up to start in the right place. Broadly speaking, I've decided a 94-minute recording into two 50-minute sections so they sort of overlap and you don't get lost. But this is going to start off with 50 minutes to go on part B of part 2, and 50 minutes of the first scenario. Hope you're enjoying it. I have to say, I've been enjoying doing this because whilst recording these and whilst going through them again, it's been nice remembering the recording and making them process, but also I've been having a lot of fun with designing my dream log cabin office for the garden. Doubt I'll ever get it, but it just seems appropriate. It's a more appropriate space than keep recording in my bedroom and keep working from my bedroom. But well, that's nothing. Anyway, as you can see, what I have got below me is Dorota, then Akagi, and then there's a scene from the Tsingtao, from When Good Guys Go Bad. That particular video and that particular presentation is the originator for all this. So if you are interested, please do go check them out. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe. It's really, really nice. And patrons are always welcome because patrons are paying for my books. I don't know. Possibly, looking at my finances, it would be a Kickstarter to pay for my log cabin, but no, that's a dream. This is practical, and I hope you're enjoying it. Right. So I'm now going to pause the video and then start the video.
God, I can never pronounce.
Actually, Soufrienne herself is a
yes,
Soufrienne
sorry.
class.
They have Soufrienne, and they have a WWII. No idea.
I'm letting Daniel do the French because apparently his mum was a French teacher, so he's far better at it than I am.
Yeah. Fortunately, this ship is called La Motte Piqué, so that's slightly easier. And she is she's a perfectly respectable light cruiser. She's got 8 6.1-inch guns. She's got 12 torpedo tubes. She's she's not the youngest. She was she was commissioned in 27, but she's not bad at all.
No. And the Royal Navy have got a C class going around, so they can't really comment about ship's age at this point.
Yeah. So the French have got some stuff there, and the Dutch, not 100% sure what they've got where, but they do have. They've got some Java class. They've got the De Ruyter, I think. They've got. So they could probably contribute a cruiser or two. I'm not quite sure which ones. I hadn't. My prep work has been a little bit lagging here. Mm-hmm. But they've got some ships, and again, they have a very good history of sort of being tough fighters at sea. They still have that bit of a British flagship in a museum that they nabbed out of the Medway. So they're gonna, and I'm presuming that at least some of their ships are going to be out that way.
Yeah.
But I haven't looked in. I will confess I haven't had a chance to look into it in the lead up. So
pretty much their forces, and I'm only going off their force in 1941. The East Indies Squadron in 1941 is the Reuter, Tromp, 2 light cruisers, Van Ghent, Cortana, Piet Hein, Wit the Whiff, and Banket destroyers. And then they have Java, another light cruiser, then Everston and Van Nies, 2 destroyers. And then they have some submarines and all sorts, and mines and minesweepers. So they have some interesting vessels. But basically it is the Reuter, Tromp, and Java, which are their big things. Their destroyers are quite cool.
They were doing interesting things, I think, with destroyers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like the Dutch destroyers. I have to say, some of the Dutch light cruisers, I look at them, I do worry about, but because Tromp is a light cruiser, but she's 3,450 tons, apparently, which, to my mind, means that she's actually a daring class destroyer size from post-Second World War. So, yeah.
Well, Wikipedia has her listed as a flotilla leader, along with the Jacob van Heemskerk.
I would agree with that as far more than a light cruiser.
Yeah. So
I have to say my source I'm using for this to quickly check this and counter check me while talking is the Pacific War Online Encyclopedia.
Okay.
Which is usually fairly good when it comes to the Dutch Navy. They're not always that great when it comes to some of the other navies, but the Dutch one, they seem to fairly well, quite well.
I'll be honest, I'm looking at Wikipedia. It's quick. It tells you something. If we get really desperate, I'm going to look at the World of Warships wiki.
Yeah, that's always a good one.
It's
one of the strange things. I don't play the game, but I do use their wiki.
Yeah, and if you're going to start playing games of sort of what's where, then, and just, if you're going to play the Top Trumps game, it's perfectly good for that.
Or the Top Trumps game.
Yes, Top Trump. That's a terrible thing. Now,
hey, look! Apparently, I've started a whole new craze of games, which is rock paper exocet.
Yes. It's not nice to spoil people's, amazing fancy new technology by going Neolithic.
It works though.
But it is the whole thing. If you can't see me, you can't hit me.
Yep. And that's basically what is also being a big factor of this thing so far. We've said Birmingham has been found and has been hit as a part of the reason for Akagi getting hit, but honestly, the odds of the Japanese finding her and hitting her are quite low at this time.
Yeah. And it's worth saying, although the Japanese are famous for their night fighting, actually, at this stage and things, the British are probably as good, if not better.
Because the British have been practicing it for 20-odd years because of what happened at Jutland.
Yeah.
Basically, the Royal Navy has a major hang-up over the fact the Germans got away in Jutland at night. It has caused the Royal Navy many, many endless nights. The reason the Royal Navy is so good at night fighting by the time we got 1939 is because they have been propelled forward in it by a passionate fury at the victory that fate denied them by the Germans sneaking away at night.
Yes. Thinking of the Japanese, before we get on to the next round of Allied reinforcements that will be coming through. It's worth saying the Japanese Navy are at this stage are in a surprisingly similar state to the Germans in 1939, in that they really, really aren't ready for war. A bit like Plan Z. They are really not ready for war. So my calculations are that the Japanese have 3 aircraft carriers at this point. Well, 2, because we've just sunk Akagi.
Yep.
But they have 2 other aircraft carriers, one of which is Ryuju, which is a light aircraft carrier, which can carry... Tiny, and can carry an air group smaller than HMS Eagle.
This is basically not the Kido Butai. The Kido Butai is a couple of years away.
The Kido Butai has not yet been launched. Their aircraft are not yet in service. The Japanese have...
Whereas the Royal Navy has Glorious, Furious, Courageous, Ark Royal, Illustrious not far off service.
Illustrious and Formidable are both going to be launched in 1940. The Americans have got their big name ones. The French have the Burn. At least said the better, I think.
And also Eagle, Hermes, and Argus for the British.
Yeah. So we've got Glorious, Courageous, Furious, Argus, Hermes, Eagle, Ark Royal.
Yeah.
Oh, plus Pegasus, which has been turned into a seaplane carrier / transport.
Yes.
Which can potentially operate as a sort of proto-HMS Unicorn.
Potentially.
Potentially. She's sitting there in the reserve, and if you've
But
got...
also, what the Royal Navy has on the construction's point is illustrious, formidable. They're all quite soon to launch. They commission in 1940, I think, but I think they might actually be launched a bit early and sort of ready. Yeah. There are things which can be sped up. The Royal Navy has a lot of things which can be sped up almost easier than other ones, especially in this warfighting scenario. You always have to remember that in World War II, because of the immediate straight into the Battle of the Atlantic, the British go straight into convoy war procurement, which is stop basically building battleships and aircraft carriers and major units and concentrating on churning up escorts and destroyers. In this scenario, they wouldn't be doing that because also, they wouldn't be having to fight the Battle of the Atlantic at that time.
And similarly, your aircraft development and things is not going to be entirely skewed towards what can I get up in the air, pretty sharpish for home defense.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind quite how exceptionally outclassed the Japanese newer fighter, the Claude, the A5M, would be by a 1938-39 Hawker Hurricane.
Yes.
So even if you keep your Spitfires at home and just send off some Hurricanes, they will make life very unpleasant for the Japanese at this stage. Mm-hmm. And that's just to give you an idea of the sort of quality and
that's the Air Force. If you're talking about naval fighters, the Royal Navy has a lot of aircraft under development this time, which get stopped because of the Battle of Britain.
Yeah.
If you have this happening, instead, those would probably be getting accelerated.
Yeah. And you've also got just in terms of other things, you've got the P-36, which is in French and US service.
Yeah.
Which will beat the Claude. And the Gloucester Gladiator or Sea Gladiator, because it does have a naval variant. It's not going to be horrifically outclassed. It's a bit outclassed, but it's not terrible.
Also, we keep talking about the Claude, but we always have to remember that actually the one which they're really going to be taking on at this moment in 1939 is going to run is the Nakajima A4N, and the Army equivalent, which, if I remember correctly, is... what is it? It's the Army fighter. It's something really weird in terms of compared to what they would later be on. I think it's the Kawasaki Army Type 92 is quite a large one, and as is the Kawasaki Ki 10. And yeah, I think it's the KI-10, which is that only came into service in 1935, and that is a biplane. They have 588 of them. They're an Imperial Japanese Army, and they're only retired in 1942.
Yeah.
So these are the fighters we're talking about them facing, and.
That looks like the kind of thing the RAF introduced in about 1928 to 1932.
Yes, it's basically the classic scenario is that we often talk about the Japanese great aircraft of 1941, but people that's overlooking the fact that they've had 2 years of peace to develop everything and build it all without the pressures of war, while the RAF and the Navy have been crashed into 2 years of war. The nicest thing is war does tend to both act as an accelerant for research, but also crash the types you're building.
Yes, it radically changes your R&D priorities. So yeah, we've got now the Japanese. Some parts of their navy apparently are still looking for this big battle, but they do not have Yamato. They do not have Musashi.
Nope.
They have, in fact, a problem that they only have 10 battleships. So they've got 2 Nagato class, 2 Ise class, 2 Fuso class, and 4 Kongo class. But my reckoning, 2 of their battleships are in reserve at this stage.
Yes.
And I don't know how quickly they can be reactivated. I don't, we kind of know about the RN's ability to activate unexpectedly because they do a few months later.
And also because they have had to for the Spanish Civil War and for other things prior. The Royal Navy has had 3 incidents, which Abyssinia crisis, etc., which have tested out their their reserve mobilization methodologies and allowed them to. How do I put it? The first one didn't go too well. The second one went a lot better, and the third one went. And then you have the fourth one is World War II, and so the Royal Navy have managed to iron out the kinks. So, seeing as the third one had happened already before January 1939, we have to presume that the Royal Navy would act based on the September 1939 model, which takes them about a month to get everything up and moving.
Yeah, and.
So let's be nice to the Japanese and say they also take them up. We'll be nice to them.
Okay, we'll be very nice. But they also have the Hiei, which I've almost certainly butchered, which is in the middle of a refit that's going to last until 1940.
And it's at the point in its refit, if I remember correctly, where everything has been ripped off. So that ain't coming back quickly.
Yeah, that ain't coming back quickly. Similarly, 2 of their more capable, at least 2 of their heavy cruisers, the Aoba class, are in the middle of a refit from late 38 to late 1940. They've got 2 of their Takao class heavy cruisers in being refitted. A lot of their big ships are not war ready.
It's really not a good time for them.
No.
Whereas the Royal Navy has actually churned out quite a lot of force at this point, and it hasn't started demobilizing them from the Spanish Civil War. So the Royal Navy, conversely, has quite a lot of its ships available.
And the Royal Navy has been rotating, and because it's got multiple fleets, they've been kind of rotating what's in refits and things. So, and this seems a perfect link on. So the Mediterranean fleet are the next option for moving east. But essentially, everything is just going to take a step to the right.
Yep.
Yeah, that took me a moment too. So, Mediterranean fleet under Dudley Pound has got Barham, Malaya, and Warspite, with Ramillies due to come out of refit at Devonport in February 39. So that means, to me, that you can be prepared to leave Ramillies in home waters, and you can shift more stuff out because she's about to come out, and then actually the fact that she's a bit slower, and then you've got 3 Queen Elizabeth class, and we know that they're in no way supersized tribals.
One of them was Warspite, wasn't it? Warspite and Queen Elizabeth were 2 of them.
Warspite.
Yeah, Warspite, Queen Elizabeth. Yeah, they're 2 ships which come with plot armor.
Yeah, Queen Elizabeth is in the middle of her refit still, so unfortunately she won't be available. But we've also got, as I run
Valiant,
through,
Barnum.
Valiant is where is Valiant? Sorry, I'm looking for my list. I'm looking at the list. Valiant was also in refit, I think. Barham.
But I'm trying to remember what phase of their refit they were in, because I'm not sure if those 2 ships weren't quite advanced in their refit and soon to come out. So how long do they take? Then they have to have workup time, I suppose, afterwards and all this sort of thing. But
they are going to make. But given that the Germans have only got the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, if you think about European threats, the Italians have got World War I era battleships. Suddenly, what you're about to have reappear, and of course, we don't really know how long things like Queen Elizabeth and Valiant's refits take because they get interrupted by World War II.
Yep.
So we don't know, assuming that they keep.
We certainly know that by August 1939, the home fleet, the Mediterranean fleet, has Barnum, Ramillies, both there, and Warspite.
Yeah.
So I would reckon that Barnum is not far off coming out of her refit.
Yeah.
If
So
she's
I
worked
think-
up and is worked up, and she's not only worked up, she is the flagship of Vice Admiral Geoffrey Layton in August 1939. So I'd reckon she's coming out of her refit quite soon.
Yeah. So you've got 3 very good ships, battleships coming through. You've got the first cruiser squadron under Cunningham, under a different Cunningham,
John Cunningham.
I hadn't looked actually. Is he a relation to ABC?
I've never been quite sure. They do seem to have a very close career though, because John Cunningham takes over Cunningham after Cunningham as well. So it's all sorts of fun. So you've got Arethusa and Penelope as well, I think there.
Yep. And you've got 3 destroyer flotillas and a tribal flotilla.
Yes. Under Creswell, who is the pre-Vian commander of 1st Tribal Flotilla, 4th Destroyer Flotilla as it becomes. And by August 1939, he has Afridi, Cossack, Gurkha, Maori, Mohawk, Nubian, Sikh, and Zulu under his command, and they've been in service since May 38, June 38, October 38, December 38, September 38, December 38, October 38, September 38. So he's got 3
ships that have just been broken in.
He's got 8 ships, but they've been broken in. They've been working out hard. They've already taken part in a large fleet exercise.
I mean, these, it's the whole thing of, for the first, 5,000 miles, when you get a car, you're supposed to drive it quite easily or something.
Yeah, they didn't do that with the tribal class.
No. But you've kind of got over those initial hiccups you get even after commissioning and workup.
Yes, they are worked up, and they were, well, if you consider also, by August, and again, they've got all the I-class destroyer. They've got I-class destroyer flotilla, 3rd destroyer flotilla, which were all completed in May 37, July 37, June 37, all these sort of things. You've got 2nd destroyer flotilla, which are the H class, which are all again completed in 36, and G class, 1st destroyer flotilla, which are again 36. So these ships, you can be fairly certain of what were coming out with them. So 4 destroyer flotillas. The odds are they take pretty much all 4 of them with them and probably activate a destroyer flotilla from reserve to cover the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
And it's the reserve fleet which will be moving into the Mediterranean.
Yeah. Because also, the reality is, you've got the French there. You've got their destroyers, because France is not about to fall.
No.
So that plan is actually about to work. All of these cunning plans around the Singapore strategy and things are actually about to work.
And they've got, must remember, they have a reserve forward base in Malta. So they have Wolsey, Wrestler, 2 destroyers, they have minesweepers, they have anti-submarine trawlers, all these things, which are based in Malta, in the Malta Reserve. They have Alexandria Reserve, they have a Gibraltar Reserve based there. They have forward-based destroyers, they have forward-based depot ships. And this includes destroyers like Active, which was HMS Active was only completed in 1930. So yes, she's not exactly what the Royal Navy would call their preferred destroyer, but she's not an old ship at this point.
When you think that their local defence destroyers are the 4-inch ones from the V&W class in a lot of places, T class and things. And of course, you've also got HMS Glorious. So she'll be coming along to play.
Yes. She already has an attendant destroyer.
Yes.
That goes everywhere, which is called HMS Bulldog. So Glorious tends to have HMS Bulldog with her as her backup. And it's actually, again, I'm not sure if Bulldog was there when she was actually sunk, but I do seem to remember there being a story that if a Bulldog crew felt that she was sunk because they weren't there to look after her after they'd looked after her for many, many years. Royal Navy destroyers get very protective over the ships they're designed to look after. they basically considered their capital ships their capital ships. They're allowed to wind them up, annoy them, and do all sorts of naughty things to cause their captains and their admirals to have grey hair. But you're not allowed to sink them.
No. Well, admittedly, intermittently, the battleships do run over the destroyers and cut them in half.
Yes.
And things. So, you know, it's the destroyers consider them theirs, and if anyone's going to get hurt if they tussle, unless it's with a tribal probably, it's going to be the destroyer. So it's kind of it's that kind of relationship, which, so, yeah. So you've got really quite a lot of force heading out. And the question is, given that Ark Royal would have only just commissioned, she's not going to be hugely part of the home fleet setup, so I'd be thinking of sending her straight across.
Probably.
Yeah, that's an awful lot. The Japanese, I feel, especially given that the Royal Navy is going to be sinking everything in sight, is not going to be very happy with them. Now,
and also they have the Monitor Terror out in Singapore as well.
They do. And
that's quite an interesting thing to have there, and that's quite an interesting defence.
Because now remind me, she would be a ship that's almost exclusively designed for bombarding shore positions with heavy naval artillery.
Well, yes, and she is if I remember correctly, I'm just checking up before I say it out loud. I'm trying to remember what gun she's armed with.
Oh, goodness.
She carries, twin 15-inch guns. So she's a fun thing to have at Singapore. And again, it's one of those things that you find her there as part of the Singapore strategy. But she is extra protection for Singapore, certainly, if you are planning on trying to take her out.
Well, also, whilst she's there, I mean, she's going to be a reason to keep large stocks of 15-inch high explosive ammunition around. Now, obviously, if she were to have left, you might not have that reason for all the other things. So suddenly you've got Singapore not just having 5 15-inch guns, but 7 15-inch guns protecting it. And you've got a reason to have all the high explosive ammunition you might want to shake a stick at before it probably all gets shipped home prior to the fall of Singapore in 41, 42.
Yes.
Because I think by that point, Terror's being withdrawn.
But also they have 15-inch ammunition out there for her, for their, how do I put this, the protection of their own guns. And their own their own shore-based deterrents. Yeah.
Well, I mean, look. Hopefully, at this stage, we're going to have Singapore not commanded by third or fourth-rate leaders who've been sent out there because all the fighting and excitement's happening half a world away.
Yeah.
And so they might actually do things like remember the fact that if you look at Portsmouth, all of the defences around Portsmouth, because I plotter past things like HMS, the Fort Nelson periodically and things, which is quite fun. They're all designed to protect from the land, because how do you attack a naval base? You land far away and you march over land to take it. So that's what you set up your forts to do.
And the thing is, you have a lot more troops ready. The British can. Going to sound strange. The Japanese aren't prepared as they were in 1941, so they aren't able to launch simultaneous operations. And so that means they and the British are reacting at the same pace. And the British can move troops from India to Burma to various places. The French Indochina is not in Japanese hands, so the Japanese are not able to move from that much closer. So they're starting from that much further away, which means Singapore is fairly secure. And there will be a lot of troops arriving there quite soon. And if you consider this, we're talking about Boyd from the Mediterranean Fleet is probably going to come with his fleets to be the fleet commander, and Percy Noble will be the theatre commander coordinating it. Because honestly, if you're going to bring most of the fleet into there, you're probably going to want to bring one of your major war fleet commanders with it. Technically, Noble could command them. He is an admiral. He is experienced. He is trusted. But if you are surging, if you are telling the Mediterranean Fleet to send most of his fleet that way, he is probably going to come himself.
Yeah. He lives on war spice, I think. So
yeah. Yeah.
But what that also means is that what we know that Pound is good at is organisation, logistics, and he understands the local situation. So actually, if you say that he doesn't have to worry about commanding battleship fleets and things, which possibly isn't something he's done so much of.
Well, that's
you say
Noble strengths and Pound strengths. Both are very good at organisation, these sort of things. But what you would say to Noble is experience as a cruiser commander. So you would probably have Boyd come out as the fleet commander. And you would have Noble as your theatre commander. Now, the interesting question, as I said earlier, under this circumstance, we are thinking it's very limited number of allies get involved, so there is no admiral of the fleet sent. Yeah. But if you do have a scenario, then you have a choice between Trit and Keys as which admiral of the fleet you send out to command. So that's probably going to be in what's part 3. When we're getting into that scenario, we're going to have to probably deal with a admiral of the fleet and which one of those gets sent and how that would impact operations.
Yeah, unless you just want to bump up Henderson and promote him and send him out.
I'd love to, but I have a feeling, given the scenario, I have a feeling again it would be probably Keys would be sent. But we'll talk about this. Talk about next time. In this scenario, we've got Mediterranean Fleet coming out. We've got home fleet, many of the home fleet units coming out. So the Royal Navy is going to quickly achieve parity, if not superiority, versus the Japanese forces. They are going to have a lot stronger carrier arm, because you are probably going to have Furious left to cover the home fleet and Mediterranean as your carrier on call, and you're going to have the rest of the carrier arm, including Argus, probably. Although she might be sitting in the Indian Ocean acting as a deterrent against surface radar. But Eagle, also, Hermes, Courageous, Glorious, and Ark Royal coming up.
Yeah, but you can also use Pegasus and Argus to be shipping planes back and forth.
Yes.
And, helping you to move your air, modern fighters and things like that. You can be getting, because your Hurricanes can't self-deploy, but if you stick them on one of those ships and then sail quickly.
To be honest, they'd probably be stuck on a cargo ship. Most of the cargo ships are probably quicker than Arguses.
Yeah. But
they'll be got around. Singapore would suddenly have a burgeoning number of Hurricanes in her, probably, because Hurricanes are the most numerous fighters available for the land forces.
Fingers crossed, the RAF will be sending the Wellington rather than any of the other early war bombers, because they all just make me cringe.
Yeah, again, the Wellington's probably the one you can actually deploy.
Yeah.
The Wellingtons actually might even be able to self-deploy if you can fly them from base to base to base.
At this stage, and with friendly skies in a lot of those places, yeah.
Yep.
Remembering that Europe is not unfriendly at this stage.
But let's be honest, even when the Wellington gets out there, it doesn't really have the range to get to Japan.
No. But it does have the range to help bomb and defend things like Hong Kong and other things.
Yeah, and basically, you would see the bomber force the RAF has built up are very much Eurocentric in terms of their ranges.
Yeah,
there'll probably be a crash designing of extremely long-range bombers would be coming up. So the Lancaster, which appears to be slightly different than the Lancaster which appeared in World War II. And B, you'd basically be swapping bomb load for fuel. And what you're also going to see is that bombing force will be more likely to be being deployed defensively. They would be part of the defense. You might well have a couple of squadrons in Singapore. So if you do try and attack Singapore, if the Japanese do try to mass their fleet to come down to Singapore, which would be even less sensible in this scenario, they would find themselves running into several squadrons of Wellington bombers going, do you like my shell? Do you like my bombs? Now, again, we can all talk about the viability of heavy bombers doing level bombing runs over naval task groups and the likelihood of them actually getting a hit. But you have to start thinking about it. It might not be it might not be that likely to actually cause you damage. But the fact you have to start calculating into your operations affects things.
And the other thing which I quite like the idea of doing is if you can actually coordinate and, use your radios and talk to each other, which the RAF are fairly good at, I think, time that so that those bombers are overhead drawing all the flak just when a shed load of swordfish turn up with torpedoes.
Yes, that
and
could
suddenly
well be
all
time
the
together.
anti-aircraft fire is going all the way up because the heavy bombers are the big worry. And the Japanese don't have radar, and they're not going to spot. Whereas, so your Wellingtons can be telling the swordfish where to fly, so they're going low. They're coming in low, so they're not going to get spotted. The Wellingtons are kind of a distraction, but they're also going to be guiding the swordfish onto the target.
Oh yeah,
that
could have that going.
That could be really quite vicious to do.
And you have to remember, whilst at the strategic level, the services often were having arguments over funding because they had different visions for how to defend the UK and its territories, at a tactical level, they often work together quite well.
Yes. It's more the exception than the rule that they don't get on. Now...
Yeah. Let's put it straight. It's contextual. It's when it's funding and budget time, they don't get on. When it's any other time, they get on quite well and work together. They all make jokes about each other.
Yes. And the other thing is, of course, we don't have Bomber Harris in charge of Bomber Command at the moment.
No.
So suddenly we aren't having every single possible bomber being tied up as we do in
Well,
World
also,
War II.
he can't really do that because if you're fighting Japan, his bombers don't have the range. This is the thing. Yeah. The RAF would be forced to change their approach to get in the war because what they have wouldn't be available. Now, yes, they wouldn't be sending out a huge amount because they probably say, we have to prepare for war in Europe. We have to be able to deter a war in Europe. And if the Navy's out there, we have to stay strong here to deter war in Europe. I can hear the arguments now. But you've going to get quite a major force out there of the British.
Yes. And I think also you're going to see the New Zealand Air Force and the Australian Air Force are going to have a very strong interest in keeping the Japanese tied up north of the equator.
And so are probably going to expand quite quickly as well.
Yeah. And they're going to be asking to buy stuff, whether it's British or American. I think they're probably not going to be caring.
And again, the Americans will probably be quite happily selling.
Yep. And as we've said, the P-36, I'd rather be in a P-36 than a A5M Claude, let alone the A4.
Oh, yeah. But, January 1939 is in many ways perfect time for the British to fight a war versus the Japanese.
Yeah, the Japanese are really, really not ready, but I don't think they had the insight necessarily at the highest levels as to quite how unprepared they would have been. And the other thing,
certainly not in this scenario.
Yeah, this is kind of January, February. A huge chunk of their army is tied up in the north, where it's very snowy and things.
Fighting the Soviets.
Ready to fight the Soviets. They're not going to be able, and with the lines of communication in rural China, they are not going to be able to pull them back to attack places like Hong Kong quickly. No. So the British are going to get troops out from India in the Middle East, into Singapore, and then able to move stuff onto Hong Kong and probably counterattack. And the Chinese nationalists have adopted they after a sort of a late 38, they kind of went on to the defensive attritional side, but they've got quite a chunky force, which quite a lot of which the Germans had trained.
Yes.
Which
And if you
is
have
gonna be the next one,
if you have
All the
the
other-
BEF come out
yeah,
as well, and remember the British Army would be quite quick to try and get involved in this, and it'd be their jungle trained units, their modern units, the best unit of tanks and all these things. You could end up having a very interesting scenario where the British forces and the ground forces. Would you want to launch an invasion of Japan straight away? No. Would you maybe consider putting a large British expeditionary force into China and attacking the Japanese positions in China? Well, yes. Which is so the Japanese are suddenly facing an attack on two fronts, probably an Anglo
French,
inspired force, but with some French and possibly even some Dutch ground units.
I mean,
attacking
the French
from
and
the
Dutch
south.
might at least be offering sort of some of their colonial units. They're not.
Yes.
I mean, the Dutch, I think, I'm not sure. I don't understand the nuances of their politics of their neutrality in Europe well enough to know whether they are going to want to send in any of their forces from Europe. I think the French probably aren't, but they have.
I think you would find the French Foreign Legion.
Yeah.
I think that's the sort of formation you would see being sent out. There would be French Foreign Legion troops, and those would be assigned to it.
Yeah.
I have a feeling the British would send not the full BEF, but quite a significant contingent of it.
Yeah.
And it would certainly, the Chinese nationalists would certainly be very happy to see it arrive, and would probably start organising up as much as they can. As long as the Royal Navy can maintain a sea line of communication to supply them supplies, they're going to be okay. The other scenario might also be that they start working on that railway road link from India into China, as they do during World War II, and really stressing that. And it's already been under development, so again, they could be accelerating that forward.
But the amazing thing to me about China, having already said it's just insanely huge, is how insanely huge some of their rivers are. The Yangtze, the Pearl, the Yellow River. These things are just vast, and so you can get your ship full. You can get the ship that's sailed across the Atlantic and the Pacific and whatever, or the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean, can sail right the way up quite a long way.
Yeah. Which has a really interesting effect on your logistics.
Yeah, so suddenly we can actually be shipping stuff. It's almost the opposite of the problems around D-Day, where we didn't capture any ports, and everything had to go over the beach, and things kind of went a bit wrong. Instead, it's the opposite. It's that we can actually sail this stuff really quite a long way and close. So although the roads might not be there and the railways are a bit patchy, the ships, and we already have a load of river gunboats out there, this suddenly gets interesting.
Yes.
The war is going to be not very fun for the Japanese, who are already struggling to guard what they've got. They're in denial of it, but
there are going to be submarines surging out there. There are going to be everything the British can surging out there. And remember, the British plan is not to invade Japan, it's to blockade it, strangle it. So, the thing is there the first thing is there going to be a fight at sea? Probably, yes. The British will be using their Town-class cruisers to attacking the trade. They'll probably also be using their submarines to try and block off routes of attack from the Japanese, but also to attack trade. So you've got submarines and cruisers going for warfare. The Japanese Navy then has to either decide whether it's going to go into a task force mode and start trying to hunt down the surface raiders, or whether it's going to form up into a fleet mode to try and intercept the Royal Navy fleet, because their only real chance of victory is going to be defeat the fleet before it forms up in full strength. Remember, the Mediterranean units are going to surge to Singapore. They won't go any further than that till they're joined up with whatever units come from the home fleet and whichever units are being reactivated from reserve. The odds are that happens, and then you have the Royal Navy going north with probably Glorious, Courageous, Ark Royal, Eagle maybe, as your four carriers with your task force, and you more than likely have I'd say 8 to 9 battleships easily in
Yeah.
the Royal Navy.
And the question is,
Leaning,
the question is whether the French could be persuaded to send either of their newer battleships or anything like that.
well, the
Or even
question
some
is,
old ones. Because the Japanese, yeah.
the question is going to be sort of more a case of are the French battleships being used to cover for the absence of the British battleships in the Mediterranean? Is that what the British are leaning on? So that's going to be a question as to whether they're there, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a single French battleship at least along.
Yeah, I think
so.
Yeah.
It gives you a force of 9 to 10 battleships probably in the strength, and this is the sort of force you're dealing with. You've probably got some Dutch light cruisers and Dutch destroyers added on. You're going to have some French cruisers probably there, definitely. The bulk of the force is going to be probably going to be the British, but it could well have up to 6 destroyer flotillas, including possibly 2 tribal flotillas amongst its number.
Yeah.
This is going to be the fleet as the Royal Navy envisaged its fleet, and it envisaged its organizations moving forward in exercises for a major fleet battle. So it's going to have destroyers in a huge sort of flotilla organization. It's going to have a rear admiral destroyers commanding them, ready to do wings. This is going to be the battle the Royal Navy wanted to fight at Jutland, really. And they're going to be fighting in one scenario where A, they can concentrate, B, they don't have to do much trade protection because all their trade is behind them.
Yeah.
And C, this is the really big thing, they're facing against the one of the few navies in the world which is likely to concentrate to fight them in this manner.
Because that's the fundamental Japanese strategy.
Yes.
And do you know what the other great thing is compared with Jutland?
Mm-hmm.
They don't have BT.
Yeah.
They don't have BT signal lieutenant.
No, they don't have Seymour. But also, what do they have? They do have probably... I doubt they'd have got radar fitted to the ships before this, but they have got a lot of experience of night fighting. They've got a lot of experience of operating and flying aircraft at night and using radio beacons for their aircraft operations. So they've got those going on. And they've got a lot of swordfish with them.
Yeah.
A whole lot of swordfish.
A whole lot of swordfish, again, going up against aircraft that look as old, if not older, when you know. And the other thing is, and this is something people seem to forget, the Royal Navy don't play fair. So the Japanese, so as well as the trade, attacking the trade, which the Japanese don't seem to have been very keen on doing, they also, I don't know how much the Japanese are thinking, I will sink their capital ships with submarines and things. I don't know how good their anti-submarine stuff is. I know that the RN submariners are bonkers and want an excuse to fly Jolly Roger and possibly tie a broom onto their, when they come back into port, and they want to. They are probably having a competition to see who can get the purser to, the supply lieutenant or supply commander to curse the most about how many torpedoes they're having to reuse. But I think the Japanese fleet is not going to have a happy time getting close to the Royal Navy, because it's not a big ocean for having that fight. It's a bit like the North Sea, only the submarines are a damn sight better, I think, than they were.
I do think the battle would probably take place in the South China Sea, possibly the East China Sea, but I think the Japanese would come forward.
Yeah,
and it might even be around Taiwan, the Straits of Formosa. I don't think the British would go through the Straits of Formosa. I have a feeling they would decide that was too narrow. They'd be going around the outside of the Strait of Taiwan on the Pacific side, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's in that area that you have the battle take place. And the Japanese would probably have their own submarines in place, but again, the sheer preponderance of destroyers the Royal Navy's brought with them, which would be using ASDIC and would be hammering the water as hard as they could.
Yes. And also the Royal Navy is going to know where the Japanese are going to be coming from and will have forward-positioned submarines.
Yes.
And so they're going to be sitting there, not too far off the Japanese coast, going, no, you're only a light cruiser. You don't deserve one of my torpedoes.
No. But
You're
battleship, hello, I have 10 for you.
Yes. Enjoy my full spread. Oh, and you have friends, and you're all still in nice formation because you were leaving harbour.
Yes, the T-class submarines were basically built as ambush fleet predators because, again, the Royal Navy didn't need to build submarines for the commerce warfare, really. That really wasn't high in their list of priorities because, again, who was going to blockade Britain? How are they going to do it? And in which Britain's planning on blockading other people, but they're planning on using their cruisers to scoop up the enemy merchant ships so they can use them. So that's what they're probably doing to the Japanese Navy. They're not sinking their cruisers; they're scooping them up, putting crews aboard, and taking them home. That's the thing. They want those, and this, of course, would have knock-on effects if World War II then expands and Italy and Germany got involved. But remember, there is no pact between Germany and Japan at this time.
No, there isn't.
So actually, them getting involved,
Wow.
They might actually decide that having the British and the French off fighting in the Far East is quite a nice thing for them to do. So getting involved, not a good thing.
Well, yeah. The question is really whether the next discussion we have, because I feel we should I've lost track of the time, but we should probably be thinking of moving to.
Yes, we will probably have. We probably have to start waiting because this one, part 2, is now going to be 90 minutes. Part 1 was an hour. Part 2 was 90 minutes.
We're doing well.
Doing well. This is why we're doing these. We are actually doing this. We're recording these about a week in advance. So we can edit them, schedule them, and put them all up so people can actually watch them. I'm going to have to start them going off on Sunday. It's supposed to be on Monday. I might actually have them start going out on Saturday, Sunday, and then sort of Monday have live discussion. And I have a feeling it's going to go on for a long time. I might have to, I don't know, get a pea bottle at this rate.
Yeah, same.
And Daniel will, of course, be on the chat. Because we haven't yet worked out how to do live stream joint videos to the YouTube. It just no.
And lockdown things mean I won't be able to come and say hello.
Yeah.
Although I am probably only about half an hour drive away from you.
Yeah, that is the joy. Right. Yeah. I'm going to say we'll do the waving thing to get to part 2, but I don't know about you, but I want a quick break to go to a comfort break. So I'll be the okay. So wave, hello everyone, take care, and we'll see you in part 3.
Hello. Right then. So I hope you've enjoyed that. That was part 2, as it to be. And I hope you enjoyed it. I am sorry if some of the camera images aren't always working right. I just noticed this since I've uploaded part 1, I've run through it on YouTube. And it worked all fine with me, but it seems somewhere in the transposition from the Skype recording to the XSplit setup to the YouTube video is some of the picture movements look a lot more clunky than they were, and although some of them were clunky, it's just me getting used to the software. I do apologize and making it work. As I said, the first few drafts of the part 1 were terrible, and some of them have, and sometimes some of the video has gone weird, and we've got weird faces. I do not know why. I have no idea on that one. I'm getting all these videos up and getting them all out. And I apologize for that. If I have managed to figure it out before enough time to redo them and upload them, I will do. If I can't, I will leave it as it is. And I hope you will bear with me while I figure out if the future ones, because I do think I'll be doing more like this. Daniel alone would like to do more like this. If there's any other patrons, etc., who would like to suggest topics and sort of this sort of scenario, I'm happy to consider it if it works like it does in this occasion. Thank you. And again, sorry. So thank you. And thank you for watching. And please like, subscribe, and share.